Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs, and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. First and foremost, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Reagan Emery. I'm a senior here at CU, studying political science with a minor in anthropology. I originally am from New Jersey, but also half of my family lives over in Colorado Springs. And yeah, I'm our student volunteer coordinator here at the conference. Great. I'm our student volunteer coordinator here at the conference, and I'm happy to be moderating with y'all today. For recording purposes, today is Friday, April 14th. It is 1:30 p.m., and the panel is titled The Importance of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion in Outdoor Recreation and Climate Advocacy. Okay, before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that Boulder is on ancestral homelands and unceded territory of Indigenous peoples who have traversed, lived in, and stewarded lands in Boulder Valley since time immemorial. Those Indigenous nations include the Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Comanche, Pawnee, Shoshone, Sioux, and Ute Indigenous groups. One other thing I'd like to mention is that we want to be sure you all get a chance to ask questions. Here's how we'll handle the Q&A. We'll reserve questions from the audience for the end of the discussion. We're using a note card system to receive questions from the audience. At any time during the session, simply raise your hand and one of our lovely producers will bring you a card. They're standing in the back over there. If you are a student, please mark that on your card and we'll make sure to get to your questions as well. When you finish, the producers will bring it up to me. I urge everybody to please make your questions brief and to the point. Okay. Now I'd like to do a brief introduction of each panelist. For more information, you can find all of their full bios on our CWA website. So with us today, right next to me, we have Wisdom Cole. Wisdom is the National Director of the NAACP Youth and College Division. In his time at the NAACP, he has worked on various campaigns, some of them being the cancellation of student debt, near and dear to my heart, removing police from schools, as well as increasing voter access for young Black people. In 2020, he was named one of Complex Life's 32 young activists who are changing the world, and we're super excited to have him back as a returning speaker this year. Next to Wisdom, we have Braylen Aldrige. Aldrige works closely with the Denver community. He's worked with Groundwork Denver, Mo Betta Green, Fresh Food Connect, and City Wild. He values and understands the importance of providing youth with a positive and enriching work environment. He believes in emphasizing teamwork, responsibility, and accountability as he leads youth through rewarding summer work projects. Following, we have J.R. Lapierre. Lapierre has a passion to help develop the overall well-being of youth and has been able to collaborate and bridge gaps in the community. He works as the managing director for Lincoln Hills Cares, which is based out of Denver. Lincoln Hills Cares develops the next generation of young leaders through outdoor education and recreation, cultural history, exploration, and workforce advancement. Their programs empower youth who may not otherwise have had the opportunity due to economic, social, or family circumstances. And last but certainly not least, we have Patricia Cameron. Cameron is the executive director and founder of Black Packers, which she started in 2019 to address the gap in representation in the outdoors. She spent many years working in healthcare throughout the Denver and Colorado Springs areas. Black Packers' mission is to make it easier for families to access the outdoors by making the initial investment for them. So please join me in giving them a hand and welcoming the panel. Now I'm just going to pass it down the line to our speakers for some opening remarks on the topic.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? Good. Y'all been enjoying CWA? Yeah, it's great to be back for the second time. And I would like to say this has probably been my first panel really talking about some hard work that is near and dear to me, being Black outdoors. I've been an avid hiker for the last 7 years, and that journey, really started when I was in college. I'm from California, grew up in the suburbs, didn't really have too much exposure to the outdoors. I ended up going to UC Santa Cruz for my undergrad, and the first thing my mom told me was, don't get lost in the woods. And so, for a while, I was kind of like terrified. I remember my first day trying to get to a job interview. And if you've ever been up to Northern California, there's a lot of trails integrated with campuses, integrated with cities, things of that nature. And so I'm trying to get to my interview, and I'm walking into the woods, and I'm just like, I don't know where this is going. And so I ended up having to walk the street path all around campus to get there. But in my time in Santa Cruz, I really had the opportunity to explore my outdoor self, going on trips, camping, trekking, just being able to be in those places and spaces where oftentimes people who look like me were not present at. When I graduated from Santa Cruz, I became a teacher at June Jordan School for Equity in San Francisco, where it was a really unique school. It was a school that was centered around social justice, diversity, and making sure that young people of color felt included. And so instead of the normal gym classes that you might have every single day, at the end of the year, we basically would take all of our students on various trips, either in San Francisco or the nearby area. And so our trip for that end of the year was to do a backpacking trip. And so we spent 3 weeks, the first couple days practicing hiking, practicing pitching tents, practicing how to lace our boots, things of that nature, how to pack, all those things that are going to be necessary for that. And so we ended up doing a 5-day backpacking trip in Northern California. And it was really interesting because, a lot of the students that we would see on the trip, during the school year, they were the so-called, problem students, so the students who were cussing all the time in class or getting in trouble or didn't want to do their work. And then you go outside on a backpacking trip where you don't have access to your cell phones. You're out there for hours. And for folks who've done those trips, that time kind of dissipates into nothing, right? Where it's like time doesn't really matter at a certain point in time. And, these kids turn into babies. And they're open to emotional conversations. They're open to addressing their trauma. They're open to really discussing what's most important to them in that period in time. And so doing that with young people, we were able to actually start a backpack locker out of the high school. And so in my career, my time doing advocacy and social justice work, something that I always try to attribute or try to add into the work that we do is making sure that we are being present in those spaces. One of the things that have been bringing me joy lately, I don't know if y'all have seen this on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, but there's a Black guy out of LA that you see hiking up a mountain. He sees other Black men and he says, this is why I have to be out here, because you are here, I have to be here. And so being in those places and spaces where oftentimes we are perceived not to be is absolutely necessary. I love it. It's supportive for my own mental health. I love bringing other people who have not engaged in those spaces before into that. And I'm excited for this conversation because I know we're about to dive into it.
Hello. So one big thing for me is just that I grew up in Denver and worked with various nonprofit organizations. And I started with Groundwork Denver when I was young, when I was 14, all those years ago. And my working with them as just a green team member was pretty impactful in the sense that I got to go out to the Rocky Mountains and different locations as well throughout Colorado that I hadn't been quite familiar with. I hadn't, even before that time, really thought too much about the outdoors and the type of things you can get involved with out there. My time there really opened up my eyes and brought in the horizons of where I thought I could go with this type of work, and I could actually take it seriously. And at that time, I was just looking for a summer job to keep myself busy. I hadn't really thought about saving the environment or the future of youth in these spaces at that time. It was something that developed over a course of many years. And seeing the need for like the youth in my community at the time, my friends, in growing up, and seeing other youth that didn't quite have access to be able to go out to the Rocky Mountain National Park, to the Great Sand Dunes, and realizing how it impacted me, I really came to realize of like, what can I do that can bring the same type of experience to the new generation as I got older. So I continued my work with nonprofits, really to kind of and to bring that experience to the youth with a structured work model, with the jobs that we offer, to be able to depart a strong sense of responsibility, accountability, and through the youth learning these type of skills and learning the idea, like how to show up to work on time, how to cooperate with a team, a diverse team, youth from all over the city, sometimes from neighboring cities, and how they can come together as a team, and their reward generally for that work is in the middle or towards the end of the summer, we have like a almost weeks-long camping trip where we do generally quite vigorous work, such as like trail building or tundra restoration, where they're able to take all the skills they've learned throughout the beginning of the summer, from May to June, with the team into this new space and a new environment that they're not quite familiar with, and working together on the project that they've been tasked throughout the day, and then once the work concludes, going back to the campsite and being able to hang out with each other on our off time with just in the tents and with the campfire that they've set up, more than likely, and being able to experience a different form of socialization than they're quite used to in the city. So that's been a big part of, for me, keeping up with this type of work, being able to know that what I can do can bring a big benefit to youth from my community and the neighboring communities that just aren't always even thinking about going out to the mountains, because it's just not something that's just on your mind, but being able to really think about accessing that outdoor space.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. I'm JR, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to give you a little bit of background story on me and how I got to where I am. So I'm originally from Haiti. We immigrated when I was really, really young to New York, and lived in New York City for a bit. And one of the things that I remember are pictures of us going to the park, which is, we were like maybe 2 blocks away, which was really, really cool. And then we moved to Queens, lived in various apartment buildings, and I was a kid where it was getting dark, and my parents had to come find me because I was outside, playing with my other friends, or find me working at a construction site, and because I just didn't want to go in, especially in the summertime. AC would always go out because of the blackouts and everything else. So as I got older, went to UConn, and then after I graduated, I went to get a master's at Northeastern and got it in sports and recreation management because I love sports mostly. And then after that, I went into the financial field for a number of years. And then from there, I transitioned into sports, working for a couple of professional sports teams and some collegiate teams like CSU. And then it was back in 2015, living in Denver, community friend, neighbor, was telling me about Lincoln Hills and how it was a historical former African American resort. And this is the work that they were doing. They were reaching about 400 youth per year, mostly in the summertime because out of school time. And he was telling me about what he'd like to see and how he could grow and so forth. And so he was at my house. We were having a party, right? So I'm listening to this, having a few drinks and a few more drinks later on. And he's like, "What are you doing now?" It's like, "Oh, I'm working at schools, my kid's school." It's like, "You should come interview and then meet my staff." So went and met his staff. So the party was on a Saturday, and next thing you know, on a Monday, I'm meeting with his staff, and then 2 days later, I'm hired, right, to get the program going, make it bigger, and provide more opportunities. So, and I look at it, I tell people, when I'm done, at some point, maybe, I'm either retired or something down the road, and some really good work has been done, and I could tell people, or people can look at it and say, "You know what, that guy wasn't such a bad guy after all, so he did some good work." So it's one of those areas of work where, I go to sleep, I'm like, some good things are being done. There's still a lot of work to be done. We're moving in that direction, but it is pretty worthy. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, I'll do this. How about that? Hi, I'm Patricia. I just drove from Colorado Springs, so apologies, my shirt is on backwards. I need y'all to let that slide today, okay? I moved to Colorado in 1994. So it's almost 30 years I've been here. I was born and raised outside of DC in PG County, Maryland. It goes back and forth with another county in Atlanta as being one of the wealthiest counties for Black Americans. I moved out here in 94 because my mother was active duty Army. She's retired with 22 years now and chilling. She works still, I don't know why. But she moved me here on the southeast side of Colorado Springs, which is off Shelton and Marlowe Circle. The southeast side of Colorado Springs is interesting because it's the most diverse part of Colorado Springs. There's also a 16-year life expectancy gap from people who live on the southeast side of Colorado Springs versus those who live on the northeast. I did a investigative piece for the Colorado Sun to look into some of that. And one of the things we found is there's not a lot of access to transit on the southeast side. It was tied for Oklahoma City as one of the worst food deserts in the country, which is surprising for Colorado Springs. And there's not as much access to open spaces or green spaces. One of the things we focus on in Black Packers is the history of wealth in this country. One of the statistics I like to bring up, not because I like the statistic, but because it's sobering, is that since the Civil Rights Movement, the median wealth of a Black family has gone down by 75%, but gone up by 14% for white families. If we cancel student loan debts, it would increase the average wealth of a Black family by 40%. In this country, wealth is often transferred through like household, equity, real estate, things of that nature. And we've seen even now what it looks like to try to get a loan in America. Black Americans are twice as likely to get declined for it, whether it's getting an initial loan or refinancing. Wells Fargo keeps getting sued because they're not good at the racism, right? Like you're supposed to hide it. But they keep getting sued more recently for not offering refinancing to Black families, even when they have similar assets and credit scores to white families. We just saw in the news that a Black family had a house that was valued at $500,000 less when they showed the house, but when they brought in a white friend and took all their pictures down, it was valued at $500,000 more. And so if you look at this country transferring wealth through things like real estate, you can see how it could be siphoned away from communities. And this is not even talking about redlining, or when Pete Buttigieg said that the US infrastructure is racist, he kind of got made fun of, right? Because people said, how is highways racist? Well, they were built through diverse neighborhoods. And so what that looks like now is you have neighborhoods that have, interstates or highways through them, but not a lot of green spaces and not a lot of trees. And that leads into environmental racism, and it also decreases healthy outcomes. And so you see a lot of that in Southeast Colorado Springs, where I was raised. Later on, I married somebody who was born and raised in Colorado Springs, a Norwegian dude. Our kid is here. And when my son was born, he was born 3 months early at 1 pound, 4 ounces. Clearly he's still here videotaping his mother, but that's how I got into healthcare, which now leads me into running Black Packers and being a wilderness first responder and a wilderness EMT. I'm also a certified interpretive guide, Leave No Trace master educator, and 4 times a Knowles graduate. I bring those up because oftentimes people ask me what do I have to say about being Black in the outdoors, and I like to mention that I'm not just Black in the outdoors, I'm highly qualified in Black in the outdoors, just in case you forget. What that means for Black Packers is the work we do is trauma informed, for one, and then 2, we work on a lot of curriculum-based programming that resources the idea of wealth in this country and realizes that the initial investment to the outdoors, be it climbing or skiing or snowboarding, can be expensive, and so we paid it up front. All Blackpackers trips are professionally guided, insured, and outfitted. And so, for instance, if you come skiing and snowboarding with us, we pay for a half-day lesson, a lift ticket, all your gear, and transportation. Same with like our Bar Lake State Park Juneteenth event. We pay for all the camping gear, the backpacking gear, etc. Nowadays with Blackpackers, I do a lot more of the executive work. But in my personal life, I do through hiking. So I was on the PCT last year, and the Colorado Trail, I think the year or so before that. And so in my personal life, I do some journalism for outdoors and, professional backpacking, as I like to call it. If you want to talk gear, I love to talk gear. But we're here to talk equity. So that's my personal life, and that's a little bit about Blackpackers, and I want to hand that back to our moderator.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Our first question was, what does outdoor equity mean to you? But I feel as though we got a pretty good answer on that. Do we want to talk about what does outdoor equity mean to you, and then why does it matter? Anybody?
Well, for me, it's about access, equity, opportunity, right? It's for those who didn't get those opportunities. It's part of our mission statement. It's about whether or not, maybe your parents weren't familiar with getting in the outdoors, or you just didn't have the transportation of getting there, and the barriers of when you do go out and, you get racist comments that are asking questions, why are you out here, right? And outdoors and nature is for everyone. And, in the end, it's got to be about everybody getting the opportunity so that everybody has, the ability to reach their full potential in where I think it's crucial is the climate action, right? So if we can't get a good handle on controlling the climate and where it's going, then all this is going to be moot, right? There won't be any access or opportunity because it won't be here, and available for us. So it's that education part where everybody, especially those who have been barred or have received, barriers from learning about it. And that's important that everybody gets up to speed as to where we need to be to help out in the long run. And yes, it's Black and brown kids, having the most barriers, right? And I know for us as Lincoln Hills, it's, that's primarily the students that we serve because they've been the most impacted. But going forward, it's about everybody working together for us, right? So give those opportunities so that in the long run, everybody can work together.
I think to your point about why does it matter, I like to bring up that the demographics in this country will look, I don't like to use the word minority, but majority people of color and not very much time. And so if we ignore the people who are taking over in the next generation that's going to lead in conservation and outdoor recreation, we're going to be in trouble. So definitely the fact that this country isn't going to look like this even just a decade, and the people who are coming up to take care of it are going to look more representative of this panel than necessarily what it looks like perhaps in the rest of the country right now.
Yeah, just to add to the access and opportunity point that JR said, something that also is really important is I think that sense of cultural ownership in those spaces, right? I think oftentimes, as we've stated before, we are othered in the outdoor space. Why are you here? What are you doing? Look, stairs. As somebody who's been going on outdoor explorations for the last 7 years, I'm thinking about the times that I've been surfing and I'm the only Black surfer out there. The times I've been hiking, I'm the only Black hiker out there. Camping, all those different things, and recognizing that there's an ownership to the outdoor space, right? Something that came up on one of the other panels before was this idea of land memory, right, and cultural recall, and the idea of being outdoors allowing you to tap into that spiritual side. And so I think for myself and many others, it's really about building that back up. I think for myself, it's about building my own mental fortitude, right? When I'm out there for hours on ends, there with my thoughts, there in nature, I oftentimes do body scans and just kind of appreciate the ability to walk, to be mobile, to be bipedal, and to be able to take those moments in time, right? I live a very hustle and bustle type of lifestyle, and I know that that's kind of the new way, or the way that we've kind of been geared to go, right? Grind. You've got to be successful. Particularly thinking about folks from the Black community, right? You have to work twice as hard just to get half as far, right? That is something that is integrated into our community. And so the ability to take time to take care of yourself and to be at peace and to ensure that you are getting reconnected with something that we were so connected with. And so when we're thinking about equity in that space, something that I've really loved, and I don't know if y'all seen this as well, is just the increased amount of outdoor Black groups, right? If you've heard of Outdoor Afro, they're a national organization. They have different chapters across the country, and they facilitate experiences for Black folks to be outdoors. Black people who hike, it's based in Georgia. They also facilitate experiences out there. One of my favorites is Black Men Hike LA. They kind of formed during the pandemic and have been consistently going strong with representing Black folks in those places and spaces. And so we are there, we've been there, we're going to continue to be there. And I think what we have to do as advocates is continue to expose young people to those opportunities. I remember I went to Seattle and I climbed Rattlesnake Ridge, or hiked Rattlesnake Ridge. And when I was telling people that I was going to go up there, they're like, "What are you doing, man? Like, Black people don't hike. And if you die up there, Black people won't go hiking again." And it was just like, we have to let go of that mentality, right? We have to be safe, right? So I appreciate the expertise and making sure that we know exactly what we're doing when we're out there. But we can't be afraid to be in those places and spaces. I think it's important for us to represent. I think it's important for us to hold those spaces. And I think it's important for us to use this as a tool for healing for many of us.
So yeah, to attest to that, one thing what I personally do is to, especially around like when I first had started back in 2008 in the nonprofit sector, is really just I communicate a lot to people from my community, to Black people and also Hispanic as well, that were much more nervous about going out to some of these outdoor spaces. And really, I found it about encouraging to get out there with either a group of friends, teaming up with an organization, but some way, somehow that would make them more comfortable to do so. And I've had too many conversations, but I'm always brought to one where I remember at a party, it was at a friend's birthday party. This one guy and this one girl were kind of going back and forth about access to outdoor spaces in the senses of how one group, she was advocating that one group would have a harder time to do so because of the cultural, environmental, and social issues that would prevent them from doing so. And he was suggesting about just making different choices can take you positive to these spaces. And while it didn't end on a positive note with the conversation, but they both had a point in the sense that, especially, both of their names escape me at the moment, but especially what he was talking about in terms of making different choices, in the senses of possibly maybe instead of you and your friends going to the club on Saturday, save that money, and then next Saturday maybe you guys rent a vehicle or take your own and go out to Rocky Mountain National Park and do 3 hours there, a little bit of hiking, just to get to check it out. And I've kind of been trying to push that to get people to see where they can go I remember a lot of the youth I used to work with that are now adults now go camping regularly, even more than me. I generally mostly go camping when I'm on the job, and they go camping on their free time. And I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm messing up something. But it's, I feel like, well, a lot of the work that I've done has really been just pushing to an adjustment of mentality. A lot of the conversations I've had with people, and I definitely understand a lot of people's their takes with it not being very sometimes welcoming in some areas. It can be kind of strange, but just about being able to have like ownership of yourself in a sense. And in a lot of ways, sometimes ignoring how some other people want to look at you, and still being able to go out with your family and your friends for a couple days out in a space that you may not have experienced before. But I've had some successful conversations on that. Others, not so much, but I think it's working on a few. They've kind of warmed over in the last couple of years. But yeah, that's my statements on that.
Yeah. Shifting the conversation a little bit to Colorado specifically, do y'all feel like you've seen the outdoor industry in Colorado actively work towards kind of closing this nature gap or being more inclusive? Is there like progression happening at all in a positive way?
I think so. The most recent has been the outdoor equity bill that got passed last year. So very proud to be part of that, where it's providing funding to organizations such as ourselves who can, provide opportunities for youth and young adults, and giving them that, there's a confidence level, that, okay, you're learning it at a young age, you're beginning to gather those skills that later on you can take and automatically use as you get older. So I think the outdoor equity bill and that fund was key. And I think it's been really more the organizations that have come out of fruition. So Patricia's company and our organization that is really pushing this, right? And that's where it's got to come from. So you can't be, if you're complaining, that, you don't have those opportunities and it's tough. It's a matter of trying to find those opportunities. It's not always easy, right? And I don't mean they're complaining for a bad reason. It's hard to sometimes navigate where are those opportunities. So, but once you find out where those are, and even then it's am I gonna go it alone or will somebody help me, right? And luckily there are organizations that can help them. And it is, hey, grab a friend and try it out. But yeah, there's fear, right? I know, people who've never been to the outdoors, they try to go to the outdoors. There's a fear of, am I going to come back, right, alive? I know parents, with kids that come up to the mountains, there's a fear of, okay, will my kid come back? And you're like, yeah, they will come back. So I think it's being pushed by the organizations that have come out of fruition. Ours has been around for a while, Patricia's and so forth, and I think that's a key aspect. So it's really more grassroots. Yeah, and I know the outdoor industry, down the road they see that, okay, here's a growing population that will have some disposable income, right? They want to tap into that. And the way to do that is to invest at these young level, so that there is, well, number one, if you want employees that are Black and brown or BIPOC, then you've got to invest in that at a very young age so that, you can grow that workforce. That workforce is, they're trying to meet these metrics of, well, we want our workforce to be diversified, but if they're not available now, then, that's not going to work. So investment is key in the long run.
When it comes to Colorado, I think one of the problems that Colorado has with diversifying the outdoors is we too often conflate outdoor recreation with outdoor adventure. And I'm very much guilty of chasing the stoke myself. I get that. But it leaves out an entire population of folks who are actually the most active users or the casual users of the outdoors. It's not the people sending it off whatever mountains y'all send it off of. I don't do that. So I try to stay on the ground when we go skiing. I don't go up there. But the point is, that's one thing, recognizing that in order to bring more people into it, Colorado has a very unique opportunity to lead the country and the outdoor industry, specifically because we have so many different outdoor industry hubs here, with VF coming here. I know outdoor retailers just left and went back to Utah, but that's a different conversation. But we have a lot of the cottage companies here. We have a lot of the adventure sports and water. We have mountain sports, backpacking, and then we also have a fairly progressive environment. I think that Colorado could do a better job of it by shifting some of that language and how we look at things. And then secondly, to JR's point about workforces, I've encouraged people, when you look at who you're hiring, are you leaving people out who have similar skills but may not present in the same way? For instance, I've been invited to speak at places that wouldn't hire me because I don't have a master's degree in XYZ. But I'm fairly certain I'm more qualified than some of the people they have in there. In fact, you have me speaking for you. But they don't take things like learned abilities. Most of the things I learned on the ground myself. The certifications I had came later. So I've asked different employers, what does it look like? Are you hiring and creating a wage where people can work? Not everybody can do these unpaid internships. And that leaves a lot of people out of a lot of industries, and specifically in the outdoor industry. And I think lastly, when it comes to what Colorado's doing, I think we're doing a better job at moving away from this idea of just diversity and inclusion, because I think those are really cool ideals, but they're not actionable. And the difference between diversity and inclusion and an action item like justice and equity is, say for instance, Patagonia, which is a great partner of ours, has a Black person in their ad. That looks like diversity and inclusion, but who is in their boardroom and who is running their company? And so I think, like, again, Colorado has so many of those people there. We could do a much better job of not just having a Black person smiling on a trail in an advertisement, but bring us into the to the companies and let us lead. And I say Black because I'm speaking from that position, but I'm talking about anybody marginalized who doesn't see themselves represented in those boardrooms.
I just want to take this second to remind everybody, if you have questions in the audience, raise your hand and one of our producers will bring you a little note card, because we're going to get to audience Q&A. So.
I have a question. Yeah. So I'm not from Colorado, so kind of bringing like a national perspective, but I actually have a question more so for the folks from Colorado. Thinking about like young Black folks across the nation and access to the outdoors, oftentimes thinking about the neighborhoods that we are in, right? New York, certain parts of LA, things of that nature, and thinking about, you know, what does it look like to bring young Black people to Colorado? Is that the answer in terms of exposing them? Do we bring them to those areas where there is more access and things more readily available? And I'm wondering, I guess, from the cities that are more densely populated in Colorado, are folks being brought out from those cities to those spaces?
That's a really good question, and my answer is no. And the reason why is because, again, I think that, you know, and this is something we talk about a lot, right? Because I can't just tell people how to go to the mountains, because the mountains aren't there for everybody. Just like in Southeast Colorado Springs, there aren't any buses to even get you to Garden of the Gods, which is like one of the best parks in America, right down the street from folks, but they can't get there. So I try to talk about what it looks like to take the skill sets that we use and the stuff you're learning, like surfing and outdoors, and give it to people in other places. One of the things I bring up is that you said this earlier, that we've always been in the outdoors. We have, and that's when we're conflating that adventure and recreation again. Because I know all my family reunions were at a barbecue on some land someplace, right? And so that's just as much outdoors. I think that I would love to bring people to Colorado. They're welcome to come to Blackpackers or School or Lincoln Hills. They got some great land there. But I also think it's a good point to think about how we can take these lessons we're learning in the outdoors and what's that mean, and making it smaller so that people can put that in their pack at home too.
I think as well, it's, you know, there's been conversations about nearby nature, right? Your backyard and so forth. So it would be, yes, come out to Colorado, enjoy what it can offer and so forth. But hopefully there are organizations, you know, in other areas that, okay, you know what, we've got a local park, maybe a lake and so forth, and, you know, start there, right? Or have kids, okay, we're gonna camp out in this park, right? And then make sure that they understand that you're gonna be safe, right? You're gonna wake up in the morning, you're still gonna be here, we're gonna have some fun tonight. And I think it starts there as well. And not easier said than done, but hopefully that could be, you know, you start small and then there's a pathway whereby that creates confidence to go out to other places like Colorado and Oregon and other places where, you know, they're passing outdoor equity funds as well.
An important part of this conversation is the significance of sundown towns. Can we talk a little bit about what the significance of that is, specifically in just Colorado communities as well? We have a history of exclusionary practices that often create a barrier for people of color to be able to fully experience the great outdoors. And a lot of this is because it meant crossing through sundown towns. Do you still see this as a current challenge for our BIPOC communities?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and yes. There's a list of some places that are still considered sundown towns. Fruita, Colorado's on them. I, as somebody who lived in Teller County, which is west of Colorado Springs, I'd argue that that's probably not necessarily the safest person if you're worried about comfort. But it's not just Colorado, right? It's all over the place. And I thru-hiked, I was on the PCT last year, and I was in Lone Pine, California, which is one of the side towns. And a gentleman chased me out of a bar and told me I didn't belong there and to go home. I got a video of it. He tried to hit me, this whole thing. It was actually, I talked about it for Backpacker Radio. And I got home, I didn't speak about it for a bit because I wanted to process that. But I also wanted to make sure I spoke on it in a way that recognizes that this exists. I don't want to negate anybody's experience with going into a town and feeling othered and feeling unsafe. I would never do that. What I do want to say is I was not deterred. And I'm going to go back, and I'm bringing a lot of black folk when I go back. So if you didn't like me there, I'm bringing like a black family reunion to Lone Pine. So the point is that, yeah, I think that sundown towns are a very real thing, and I know sometimes it's hard to make these points tangible because there aren't laws anymore about a lot of these things. And so when I say things like, I don't feel safe here, yeah, well, it's against law this, but when does a law work for me? Like, let's be real. And then secondly, maybe I'm legally allowed to be there, but how do I feel like a part of the community? And again, this is coming from somebody who lived in Colorado for 30 years after living in PG County. So I went from like literally Chocolate City to not. That's the best way I can say that, to the opposite of Chocolate City. But I think the safety issues are real. And I would not tell somebody who was concerned about that their concerns are not warranted. But again, like I said, there's so many different people, and you're seeing some of these on the stage that I'm sure have their experiences, but we keep going. And that's kind of how it's been in the history of this country, that we've been presented with these barriers and discomfort, and we push through it. And if you're not okay with pushing through it, that's okay. You can get behind some of us that are okay with pushing through it, and we'll try to cover you. I think that's what a lot of our work is, to cover people.
That's an interesting question to answer, in the sense just that I know I've had my weird experiences out in certain places, like in Salida and past there, with people, I think, being too interested in your own business, particularly. But it's because that's still one that I'm working on, how to when I have these conversations with people in my community. And some that are still nervous, I'm trying to check out some of these places for legit reasons, is how to, I don't want somebody to say overcome, but how do you do what's best for you in going to some of these outdoor spaces? Of course, I understand why no one would want to go anywhere where it may not be safe. And so I do believe there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in making sure that the places that people of color primarily want to go to aren't hostile from the other people that are also attending. How to go about that, that's a different it's a different question altogether. But the best I've been able to express with people is just about again, making sure you research the area quite well, and not just the park itself, for example, but like the surrounding, like the cities surrounding it, because sometimes I've made that mistake of not researching neighboring cities, and that was I will say my experience in Colorado hasn't quite been as hostile in certain places I went to compared to some other states. And so when I was checking out the Everglades in Florida, that was fun, but that was I got called different words there. I hadn't been called before. And I learned different things. I didn't know that I had to write that down in my book. But it was interesting in the sense that, I realized then how little insults really did for me, and didn't even hurt. It was just it was more funny than anything that people still kind of go about that. But I'm a different type of person in that regard, and I can't put that on everybody else. But it's that one I still, because I ask that question often, I don't really have a legit, I believe, solution on how that could realistically look for people. So the best I can offer in that sense is researching the area and surrounding areas. And maybe like what Jar was saying earlier about just starting smaller and checking out more local first, get comfortable, get acquainted, get confidence within yourself before you decide to go out somewhere maybe where you don't quite have that level of confidence yet for yourself. But I guess that's more of a personal thing, where you feel you're at in that regard.
Yeah. I think just to define what a sundown town is, and thinking about that over the course of our history, right? Let's think back to the antebellum South, right? And basically, post-slavery, folks who would go into certain cities after sundown would be at fear of being lynched, right? Lynching just became illegal last year. Literally, one of my fraternity brothers, who is Congressman Bobby Rush, had been working on that his entire career, former Black Panther, and that just became illegal. Like I said, I'm from California, and for me, growing up, drived across the city, across the state at all hours of the night, not really worried too much about getting stopped or issues of that nature. Moved to DC, actually close to Peach County, so right there, and was driving down to Virginia, and my taillight was out, and I kept getting stopped and pulled over and over again. And then I was going to leave. I was driving down to Hampton Roads, and then I was going to leave at 8 p.m. at night to get there by 10. And one of my friends was like, "You can't do that. You know, Charlottesville, that's a sundown town." I'm like, "What you mean a sundown town?" I'm like, "People go there at night and don't come back." And so persistently, even throughout the South, to kind of expand the conversation, that is still a lived reality for many people. Many Black parents and family members tell their young people, you have to be in before the street light turns on, right? Those are things that are told and heard. And so when we think about that from an outdoor context and perspective, what I'm thinking about is what are we doing to, get rid of these sundown towns and make sure that folks have more access to those spaces, right? Because I think part of the fear is the outdoors, is being in those places and spaces, and that's why it's really important for us to go in groups, go in teams, go with people who can support you, but also figuring out ways that we can change that culture of that city, of that town. It's not going to happen overnight, right? Again, lynching just became illegal last year, But what are we doing? And I really love this outdoor equity bill and want to explore more of that and how we can kind of expand that across the country, because I think that's what we need, right? To allow folks to feel seen in those spaces, to feel heard in those spaces, and to be accepted, because this is for everybody, right? It's not just for some of us, it's for all of us.
There were people that voted against it too. Like, remember that? When people that voted against lynching being not legal or illegal. I was like, wow, like, why are you so pro-lynching, bro? Like, I remember when that happened.
You go.
Quick perspective is, I think about those places that are still unwelcoming, and I think at some point they're going to be in trouble because they're going to be dying out, right? Whereby you got a changing face of demographics and people, with some disposable income, and if that's the mentality they're going to have in the long run, then your town will not be around very long. And so I think about, well, I'm not taking my money there. I think about where else can I go that it's going to be easier access, and sometimes not push it. I know, I grew up in New York. I went to a Catholic school, about 3,000 kids, maybe a handful of black kids, and so forth. But it wasn't, I didn't try to push the limits overtly, but it was kind of like, well, I'm here. If you're uncomfortable, that's your problem, right? That kind of attitude. So, but it's difficult. You got to gain that confidence to be able to do that over time. So, thanks.
One of our other questions is, how is outdoor equity important in protecting our landscapes? Climate advocacy is an important part of this conference and this conversation for sure. And I think, JR, maybe you touched on this a little bit before too.
Yes. So, climate change affects everybody differently, and it certainly has affected, BIPOC individuals in a worse way. But, there's got to be accessibility in mind when you're moving towards outdoor spaces, and create an environment where everybody's welcome. And it has to be, with so many people, you've got to make sure that you bring people along, and if you are, and if you're not, then we're not going to get to where we want to be by still isolating people, right? It's not going to be a really, cohesive way to move and make some critical action, and it's just going to be worse. I don't know how to explain it more, but it's just one of those, it's common sense, right? You got to have everybody participate if you want to get to this, and other people are important. It's it's not just me. And if you don't have that mentality of, okay, we're at a critical point here, we need a lot of people doing things very, very quickly, it's better to have those numbers, right, versus a few. And it's the best way I can explain it.
I think conservation needs to be decolonized. That's like number one. I think a lot of our conversations around conservation comes from that that aspect of like conquering and using resources. For instance, I'm a Leave No Trace master educator, but I have amended the curriculum to teach in a culturally competent way. And one of the reasons why I do that is because the indigenous people here, one, they still have treaties where they're allowed to harvest on national forest land, which the average person cannot. But also because they didn't really typically struggle with this idea of over-harvesting. They recognize the idea we take what we need and no more, and how they fit into that. I think this country in particular struggles with that because we have a very liberty-driven society, individualistic, and whether or not you think that's good or not, it's certainly not good for an environment where the actions take a collective response to it. And so I think that when we talk about conservation and we talk about things like Leave No Trace, as much as I love it, making it culturally competent and local. And so, for instance, like Colorado Springs, we just had a tax, which is hard to pass any taxes in Colorado Springs, or tax renewal in Colorado Springs with the TOPS tax. which pays for the trails and open spaces and parks, things like that. It was originally declined, and most of the people that declined it were the ones who did not have access to parks. And so I'm on that board of directors, and we look at the voting map. So people on the west side of Colorado Springs, if you know about Colorado Springs, it's right against Pikes Peak on the west side. They voted yes, and people on the southeast side, like I mentioned, in the south said no because they don't have access to those spaces. And so it goes back to if you're keeping people away from them, how can they advocate for something that takes collective action? So starting locally and either creating spaces for people to invest in or helping them invest in their local actions, and that ultimately rolls into like a global collective action for conservation.
Can we talk a little bit about just climate advocacy as a whole? A lot of you are involved in some really fantastic programs and just work as a whole. So what are some things that you're doing that you would like other people to also take home from this and start getting involved in too?
Yeah, I think, again, it's great to be here at CWA and to have this platform in this space. And one, I also want to thank all of the student leaders who've been doing amazing work to make sure, can we give a round of applause for them? They've been doing a great job. And just thinking about the way we started this CWA, recognizing that climate justice is racial justice and racial justice is climate justice, I think it's really important for us to really think through ways that we are increasing, as we've said here before, access and opportunity to climate advocacy, right? As you probably have seen, the climate justice space is very white, right? There are not a lot of black young people in those places and spaces. I know there are organizations that are working to do that, organizations like Sunrise Movement, organizations like the NAACP, and others. An organization in Flint, Michigan, Millennials for Flint, Black Millennials for Flint, really great organization, but really working to really achieve climate equity and climate justice. And so I think what that really entails is making sure that, one, people have access to the curriculum, right? This should be a part of our schools. Folks should be engaging in those places and spaces. Folks should be, teachers should be taking their students outdoors and doing those activities and doing that in a consistent way and manner, right? The school that I talked about earlier that I taught at, we had a community garden. We were taking kids on hikes frequently. We were making sure that they had those skills to survive, and recognizing that it's not just stuff that happens in the classroom, but outside the classroom. And so really making sure that we can do advocacy with our local elected officials, with our school boards, to ensure that we are incorporating that. I think making sure that folks are attuned to the changes that are happening on the national level, right? The Inflation Reduction Act is the largest climate investment in U.S. history, right? That means that there are going to be green new jobs happening in America. We want to make sure that those green new jobs are filled with a diverse population of young people and folks who can access those spaces, because one, there's money in those jobs, but two, if we want to see the best solutions for the future, we need to have diverse minds in those roles and spaces, right? And it's not just enough to say we want diversity by saying we want to have people of color and women, because oftentimes when we do those things, as I said before, it only benefits white women, right? They say that with technology, and we saw the same thing happen there. We said that with free college, and we saw that happen there. There's so many things that happen in those places and spaces. We have to do targeted outreach to the communities, to the organizations that are already working and doing those things on a day-to-day basis to make sure that those people get plugged into those jobs that are going to transform our future.
Yeah. Yeah, you go.
So, I guess one way I've handled the situation really is just about making sure that the programs that we have for our youth teams are structured in a way where we have really strong and consistent work with local nonprofits that specifically work in either some form of health and wellness, outdoor education, or even we have some working more like food events, for example, a food distribution throughout the city. So giving the youth that an opportunity to experience what these nonprofits do, giving the youth the chance to experience the ability to go out to these outdoor spaces that they may not have even thought of before, that within itself opens them up with the idea of what is it that like I could do even outside this job that could benefit my community? Maybe once, let's say, the summer ends, that I could like volunteer at a local food drive, volunteer maybe with some of the nonprofits we worked with over the summer that still do some work on the weekends with connecting with other members of the community for health style projects, such as like training for. We have some people that work with training, like with yoga, and other physical styles of projects, particularly. Working with being able to work with their hands, like planting, starting gardens, even starting indoor gardens, being able to maintain a garden throughout most of the year within your own house. Because some people live in mostly like apartments and don't have access really to actual ground. These youth then will continue doing this type of work throughout the year, independent of us particularly, and even teaming up with their friends. We've had many youth start even groups at school. One of our team members, she started like a garden, I remember, at her school with a group of her friends from just one summer with us. One of the kids that he worked with us a year ago, he started like teaching a lot of his friends and then even his school about the benefits of juicing and using a juicer to make juice instead of constantly buying stuff from 7-Eleven. That within itself, and not every youth, because now I'm at the age where some of the youth I've worked with are in college and even graduated college. And not all of them particularly follow this path for a career, but will still do volunteer hours with people, will still even come work with us every now and then. Some will actually go into this as a career. And in my experience, I've had more youth go into doing community action from our jobs than I have even when I worked at Groundwork Denver years ago. And so, and I don't believe that would have happened in that way had I not structured the programs in the way that I have without, if I hadn't exposed them to these different nonprofits, to certain outdoor spaces, even just taking them to different parks in the city that they hadn't been to before. So that's how I feel like I've handled the situation on a local level.
Some questions from the audience. I've gotten a few. One of which says, what ways, if any, are we seeing the United States or the EPA fight against environmental racism? We talked about the outdoor equity bill. Are we seeing others like that passed?
I just participated in the climate reality training. It's put on by the Climate Reality Project, which is an organization of Al Gore. So a lot of the money from the IRA is going into that direction. You know, there's lots of money, lots of green jobs, lots of infrastructure. And so it was pretty mind-boggling as far as, okay, it's already turning around, you know, like the solar industry, right? It's really booming right now. It's really spreading very quickly. So there are definitely initiatives that are happening right now and I think there's a lot more that we just don't know about it because it's moving really, really fast, right? And I think a key component is that we've got an administration that is pushing for this. We don't know what's going to happen, you know, if it turns to another administration. So, but that is happening, and it's hard to keep track of. You know, there's a lot going on. So yes, it is happening, in my opinion.
I'm very much making local areas where people are able to shop and get to schools or grocery stores without having to drive. Colorado in particular is a very car-centric state. That's a constant fight. We've seen that, and we're seeing it at the Denver mayoral election about if we're going to do bike lanes, if we're not going to have bike lanes. If they're incentivizing driving or having e-bikes or electric vehicles. I think those are great. I think we need more of that, and a bigger push towards not necessarily being so dependent on cars. I think just a few time trips a week where you're not driving your car and you're walking or taking a bike instead can have huge impacts if all of us did that. So I would say that Colorado has some things. We even have an environmental justice the governor's environmental justice advisory panel. So we have different panels like that. I definitely think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And saying that, it seems like it's overwhelming and it's impossible, but all the statistics show us that the smaller individual reactions, like lowering our own individual carbon footprints, can do a lot in the grand scheme of things.
Okay. Somebody out there would like to know if fishing is a part of the outdoor experience you are all exposing young BIPOC people to.
Have y'all heard of Elin Stribling? The Black Steve Irwin? Okay, now you have. Look him up. He does a lot of awesome fly fishing stuff here in Colorado. He's actually helped lead a few Blackpackers events to take people out there. I fish, but I am not good at watching the things I eat be killed, so I cannot fish too much. But yeah, of course, don't you do some of that?
We do a lot. So fly fishing is part of one of the curriculums that we have, and we don't use a traditional fly rod. We use a tenkara rod. So a tenkara rod folds into itself, and it's got no spinner, no reels, and it's just basically, you're doing the motion of, when they used to do it back in the day when they didn't have all that equipment. So we do a lot of that, and we also teach them about the entomology part, and under a microscope, go fish some bugs out of the stream, look at it under a microscope, and understand what are the fish eating, what fish do we have, depending on which location. So we do a lot of that, and it's great. There's kids who've never held a fishing rod in their hands. I remember one where I was helping out, and this kid caught his first fish, so excited, and he gave me a high five, and I thought he almost took my hand off. It was so hard, and he was so excited, which was that great emotion is what we look for in getting all the time.
Survival skills, right? I think part of what folks are talking about too with these outdoor activities and things that we're doing is also like how to survive, how to make sure that folks feel a sense of ownership of they're able to complete a task, get things done, and build up their self-confidence.
JR, I also was very excited when I caught my first fish. I have not caught a fish since.
That's why they call it fishing.
I will say, though, for all of my audience folks, get out your pens or your notes apps, because I've had 3 questions. The audience would like to know, other than some of the groups that mentioned on the panel or the ones that y'all are involved in, what are some local environmental justice, outdoor equity, or just U.S.-based groups that you would like to shout out?
I would like to shout out Mo Better Green and Groundwork Denver. I've worked with both of them for many years, but they've been some of the more consistent nonprofits in youth development with Groundwork Denver, and with health and wellness and detailed attention to the needs of the community with Mo Better Green. And Mo Better Green will be starting off their farmers markets starting Juneteenth, Saturday and Sunday, and then it'll be every other Saturday at the Sonny Lawson Park, where they'll be having their farmers market and selling their will be world famous juice at the markets, and they'll be that'll be going through until October, if you're ever in Denver and you want to check it out.
I'm going to call out organizations, Patricia's and other organizations such as Outdoor Afro, the City of Denver, the Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency department that they started is doing some great work. And a lot of the funders that we're getting as well, thank you to those organizations that see the need for this. And unfortunately, it takes some tragic events for a turnaround, but it's really, going in the right directions locally. So many others.
I'd like to Food to Power in Colorado Springs. It's formerly Colorado Springs Food Rescue. Patience Kabwasa is a Black woman who's the executive director of that organization. They started off by collecting food from like Whole Foods or natural grocers and redistributing it, the stuff that they were going to throw away. And now they have their own like huge garden and greenhouse at Hillside, which is a historically Black neighborhood in southeast Colorado Springs. They also do like urban gardening and senior delivery of fresh foods. They have speaker sessions where they come in and people teach their family recipes. So a Congolese man is coming in to teach about the stuff he likes to cook with his family. So yeah, Food to Power in Colorado Springs is one I recommend.
Yeah. Again, Black people who hike, Black men hike LA. I'm gonna throw in Black Girl Trekking, another great group. And then another speaker that I actually met last year at CWA, Sean D'Angelo, he runs Everybody Eats Atlanta, which is a really great organization, does a lot of community restoration, gardening, growing own food. They got a bike locker, do outdoor adventures as well, and so does a little bit of everything.
Yeah, thanks everybody. That is our 3-minute mark, so I'm gonna turn it over to y'all for closing remarks.
Okay, you see it? That was aggressive. No, so I would say that in terms of Black Packers, if you're interested, it's blackpackers.org. We do activities year-round. We'll be at Arapahoe Base on the 22nd. If you want to volunteer, we have a volunteer form on our website. And this year we're actually opening through a $250,000 grant from the Colorado Health Foundation, a wilderness education school. And so I'll be teaching people wilderness first response and wilderness first aid at Camp Shady Brook. It's like free lodging, stuff like that. This summer. So if you're interested in volunteering or you know somebody who wants to get a woofer, might not be able to afford it, send them our way.
Lincoln Hills Cares, we do great work with the fact that we collaborate with so many organizations, close to 70 over the years. And it's about maximizing resources, which is key. So we're very proud of that. And it's important that people know that, although we're providing opportunities for BIPOC, doesn't mean that we're excluding those who are not BIPOC, right? It's a journey that we're going along the way with anybody who believes in what we're doing and what's important.
The ability to be able to work with a nonprofit that really specializes in youth development has been really great. I feel like I've been able to give back to the youth from my community with this work that I probably wouldn't be able to do in a lot of other career fields. And this summer we're looking for another busy summer for our youth teams. We'll be all over the state doing restoration projects and in each location. So I think it's going to be another good year.
If you're asking yourself what you can do after this panel to continue this work, I think one, supporting local organizations and joining those local organizations. I really encourage folks to connect with local school districts, and if these school districts don't have backpack lockers, they don't have gear lockers, spaces where they can rent out stuff at either little to no cost. I think those are great initiatives or ways to really begin to increase access and opportunity to the outdoors. I think it really starts with exposure and making sure that young Black people know that they belong in those spaces, that they can master those spaces, and they can become experts, right? You can go from a hiker to a trekker, you can be a surfer. Another page to follow is Black Galatian, understanding the history of Black folks in the Appalachians and how folks have been engaged in those outdoor spaces for a very long time. There's a documentary that actually just recently came out that I urge folks to check out, because it really breaks down that history and understanding of where people of color have really come from in those spaces.
Thank you all. I appreciated this panel a lot. Sometimes I was so engulfed I forgot that I was supposed to be asking questions. Thank you all for coming out today, for spending some time here at CU. Thank you to all of our audience members. Please join me in giving a hand to everybody.
you.
Yeah.
Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs, and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.